I used to love the silence of our house at night. My husband traveled often for work, and while I missed him, the stillness always felt comforting, like the world paused just long enough for me to breathe. Our home sat at the end of a quiet rural road, far enough from town that traffic noise never touched us. Just fields, trees, and the occasional lonely owl. That night, silence was the first thing that woke me. Everything felt wrong, like the air in the room had thickened. I blinked at the ceiling fan, expecting to drift back to sleep, when a sound cut through the stillness, a slow, heavy footstep directly above me. The attic. My first thought was ridiculous in hindsight. Maybe he came home early. My husband had surprised me once before, showing up at midnight because he'd finished his meetings early. For a second I smiled in the dark, imagining him fumbling around up there, looking for the suitcase he usually stored in the attic. Then came another footstep. Heavier, deliberate. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, thumb hovering over his contact. If he were home, he'd have called. He always did. The footsteps stopped, right above the bedroom door. Every hair on my body stood up. Before I could move, I heard the long, groaning stretch of the attic ladder unfolding into the hallway. Each hinge protested, echoing through the quiet house like a warning. Someone was climbing down, slow and steady, putting weight on the rungs one at a time. My heart raced so hard I felt it in my fingertips. I slid out of bed, crouched behind it, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The glow of my screen felt blinding. I shielded it with my palm as the operator answered in a calm, practiced tone. "There's someone in my house," I whispered. Footsteps pressed it into the hallway carpet. Careful, controlled. Whoever was out there wasn't panicked. They were patient, intentional. The operator told me to barricade the door if I could. I wedged a chair under the handle, though I knew it wouldn't stop anyone determined. The doorknob turned moments later, slow and steady, testing the resistance. The chair scraped half an inch, held barely, then silence, followed by breathing. Right outside my door, the operator kept whispering that help was minutes away. Minutes felt like a lifetime. The breathing stopped so abruptly it made my stomach drop. For a full 30 seconds I heard nothing. Not footsteps, not movement, not even the faint creak of floorboards settling. I held my own breath without realizing it. Then the steps moved again, but away from my door this time. The intruder began checking the other rooms, opening doors one by one. The guest room, the bathroom, even the linen closet. Each soft click of a doorknob made my chest tighten. He wasn't searching chaotically, he was searching methodically. The operator murmured in my ear, "Officers are 3 minutes out. Stay hidden." 3 minutes. Downstairs, cabinet doors opened. Drawers slid. Something clattered into the sink basin, like he was looking for something familiar, or something he had left behind. Then, just as suddenly, everything went quiet. Red and blue lights swept across the ceiling. Sirens broke the silence. Doors slammed outside. Voices shouted commands. I stayed frozen until someone pounded on my door, announcing themselves. When I opened it, 2 officers guided me downstairs. They checked every inch of the house, weapons drawn, but the intruder was gone. The back door stood open. Dirt smudged the doorknob. He'd slipped out minutes before the police arrived. Morning didn't bring comfort, only answers I wish I'd never heard. The attic showed signs of someone living there, a sleeping bag tucked behind boxes, empty water bottles, wrappers, a portable charger, a blanket draped over insulation to muffle sound, dust disturbed in long trails, paths someone had walked over and over. My stomach churned as I realized he hadn't just broken in, he had been there for days, maybe longer. Then the detective played back my 911 call in the background after the officers entered the house. But before they found me, there was a sound we hadn't noticed before. A long, controlled exhale directly into the microphone. The intruder had walked right past my phone. He'd seen it recording, and instead of running, he had leaned down and breathed into it. Almost like he wanted me to hear it later. Like he wanted me to know he knew exactly where I was hiding. He was never caught. 6 years later, I still live in the same house. The attic is sealed, the alarms are loud, and cameras cover every inch of the property. But every night before bed, I listen. Not for footsteps, not for doors opening, but for breathing. because I know he remembers me, and he was never finished. I never thought buying my grandfather's old house would feel like inheriting a ghost. Birchwood Lane was the kind of quiet rural suburb where people waved from their porches and kids rode bikes until the streetlights flickered on. I moved in last March, excited to finally own a place of my own, a house tucked at the very end of the cul-de-sac, isolated enough to feel private but close enough to neighbors that you weren't completely alone. My grandfather's estate had been in the family for generations, and after his passing, it was mine. Creaky floors, dusty corners, and all. The first 2 weeks were uneventful, just me settling into the routine of work-from-home life. Then it started, a subtle metallic scrape around 3 a.m. I froze at first, convinced it was just the house settling, something shifting in the garage. But the sound repeated night after night, each time more deliberate, scraping, tapping, then a faint prying noise. I began checking locks obsessively, even adding a new deadbolt to the garage side door. Still, the sounds persisted, sometimes fading before I could fully process them, as if whoever or whatever knew I was listening. I finally installed a set of small security cameras, more out of nerves than expectation. At first, the footage showed nothing. Empty concrete, shadows, stray cats. But I kept the system running, night after night, until one April evening I saw him, a figure crouched beside the garage door, hood pulled tight over his head, gloves covering his hands, a long metal tool in his grip. He moved slowly, deliberately, glancing toward the street before prying at the door. My blood ran cold. He had been studying me, my routines, the comings and goings that I thought were private. I called the police immediately, hands shaking as I watched him retreat into the darkness, disappearing along the fence line before they could reach him. The police investigation revealed a notebook in the intruder's car, a chilling record of my life. Days, times, even when I went to the grocery store or left for work. 6 homes on Birchwood Lane were detailed, and I was number 4. Every detail written meticulously, including the description of my car and the times I left the driveway. He had been watching me for months, mapping my life with a patience that made my skin crawl. The realization that someone had been lurking, learning my habits, made me feel violated in a way a simple break-in never could. I spent the next week installing more cameras, reinforcing locks, and sleeping with one eye open. The police assured me he was caught, yet the knowledge of how long he had been observing me left a lingering paranoia. The house I inherited to feel safe in now felt like a cage, each floorboard a potential hiding place. I eventually sold the house, moving to a small apartment in town with better security and no secluded corners. I still play out scenarios in my mind. What if I had left for work just a minute earlier? What if he had succeeded? The worst part is not the physical threat, it's knowing that he saw me, learned me, cataloged my every move, and vanished into the shadows before I even realized it. Months later, I still check over my shoulder, even in broad daylight, and every quiet scrape, click, or groan of metal in a garage anywhere nearby makes my heart leap. The watcher's notebook may be gone and the intruder behind bars, but the fear he planted in me is permanent, like a shadow stitched into the edges of my life. I inherited a house. What I never inherited was peace. I didn't even know my uncle owned property, much less an entire farmhouse, until the attorney contacted me. The man barely made eye contact as he slid a folder across the table and said, "He left it all to you. Said you'd know what to do." I didn't know what that meant, but the deed had my name on it, and curiosity has always been my worst flaw. So 2 days later, I was driving through a rural stretch of county roads, where the only landmarks were rusted tractors and mailboxes leaning like tired old men. The farmhouse stood at the end of a dirt path, flanked by empty fields that stretched toward the tree line. It didn't look abandoned exactly, more like something was waiting inside. The windows were shuttered tight, even though the afternoon sun blazed overhead, and the porch boards sagged as if something heavy had paced there for years. Inside, the air smelled like dust and something metallic, faint but unsettling. My uncle had never married, never had kids, and as far as I knew, never invited anyone to visit him. So why he'd spent the last decade living out here in isolation was a mystery I hoped the house could explain. I started in the kitchen, where dishes were stacked neatly but coated in a filmy residue. The refrigerator hummed despite being empty, except for a single brown envelope labeled "Do Not Open" in my uncle's handwriting. I left it alone. I wasn't ready. The real discovery happened in the cellar. I found the door behind a curtain that didn't match any in the house, like it had been placed there purposely to hide the entrance. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended into near darkness, using my phone flashlight to guide the way. The cellar wasn't full of storage or old furniture like I expected. Instead, rows of notebooks lined the walls, hundreds of them. Some were leather-bound. Some were just stacks of loose paper held by twine, all covered in dust. The first one I opened was filled with diagrams of the land surrounding the house. The fields, the woods, even the creek down the hill. But under each diagram were notes that made my stomach tighten. Movement beneath the soil, not natural. Survey teams spotted again at 3:27 a.m. If they break through, the house won't be safe. Page after page recorded sightings of unmarked trucks, drones flying too low, strangers in reflective vests walking the fields at night. One page had a crude drawing of a tunnel with arrows pointing downward and a single phrase, "They're not digging for minerals." That was enough to make me slam the notebook shut. When I climbed back upstairs, the house felt different, like it was listening. The shutters rattled though the wind had stopped, and something beeped softly behind one of the walls. A device, or a camera. My uncle had been watching something, and now something was watching me. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard faint vibrations humming through the floorboards as if machinery ran deep underground. Around 2 a.m., headlights swept across my window. I froze. A van idled at the end of the driveway, its engine barely audible, like it had been modified to run quietly. The driver didn't get out. The van just sat there for 4 full minutes before rolling away without ever turning on its exterior lights. That was when I opened the envelope in the refrigerator. Inside was a single key and a note. "If they find you in the cellar, you won't come back out. Follow the chalk line." Chalk line? I hadn't seen any chalk lines. But when I returned to the cellar and scanned the floor, I noticed a white marking behind the shelving. A small trapdoor, one I would have missed if I hadn't known to look. The key fit perfectly. The trapdoor opened to a steep ladder descending into darkness. The air that rose up smelled like cold stone and gasoline. My better judgment demanded I close the door and walk away, but the hum beneath the house was louder now, more insistent. Curiosity pushed me downward. At the bottom was a tunnel reinforced with metal supports. The walls were lined with wires and sensors blinking red. My uncle hadn't built this. Whoever had must have operated in complete secrecy. The tunnel stretched deep beneath the fields, leading toward the tree line. The further I walked, the more frantic the notebook's warnings sounded in my head. Halfway down the passage, I found what my uncle had been documenting. A chamber roughly the size of a garage was filled with equipment labeled in codes instead of words. Generators, crates, computers, all marked with symbols I didn't recognize. One monitor flickered to life as I approached. A live feed popped up. My uncle's farmhouse, my bedroom window. Someone was zooming in right now. Then the camera shifted. Not a camera, someone carrying a camera. They were inside the house. The monitors changed one by one, showing angles from hidden devices placed in the walls, the attic, the yard. The last feed showed the cellar door swinging open and boots descending the stairs. They were coming. I ran back toward the ladder, but the hum of machinery crescendoed into something sharper, something like a signal being activated. Lights flickered red along the tunnel walls, and the floor trembled. When I reached the cellar, voices echoed above me. Calm, professional, close. I shoved the trapdoor shut and climbed out, racing through the house and out the back door, sticking to the tree line. From the shadows, I watched the men sweep through the farmhouse with practiced precision. They didn't look like police. They didn't look surprised. They looked like they'd been here before. One of them found the notebooks, another opened the envelope drawer. Then the leader spoke into his radio. The nephew knows. He saw the tunnel, switched to containment protocol. That's when every light in the house went black, and the men turned toward the woods, toward me.